weeks ago, the malevolent Sarevok brought the city of Baldur's Gate to the edge of destruction. You, like him, are a child of Baal, the dead god of murder. Baal foresaw his own death and sired mortal children in an effort to bring about his return. Sarevok intended to become the new lord of murder. You put an end to Sarevok's plans and slew your half-brother. With his passing, you became known as the hero of Baldur's Gate. Now, a new threat casts a shadow over the city. A massive army on a holy crusade has thrown the Sword Coast into turmoil. Little is known of the crusade's leader, the charismatic warrior Kalar Argent. Those who follow her revere her as the Shining Lady, but her background and goals are shrouded in mystery. Some say she is divine, a hero sent by the gods to crush evil no matter the cost. Others whisper that she is another spawn of Baal, intent on following the same path as Sarevok. One thing above all else is clear. If the Sword Coast is to find any measure of peace, Kalar Argent must be stopped.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you our final part in our Stories of Baldur's Gate series. In this particular part, we are covering the Siege of Dragonspear, specifically the main plot of Siege of Dragonspear. There's actually a ton of side quests and variations and things you can do here and there. So we're going to cover some of that, but mostly the main plot here, so people actually know what it's all about. As Siege of Dragonspear is intended to bridge the gaps between the first and second games. Now, it is worth mentioning real quick, though, that Siege of Dragonspear was put out in 2016, whereas the original game released in 1998. So, Siege of Dragonspear was made just for the purpose of kind of filling in the gap between the two games. So, with that out of the way, as we learned from the intro cinematic there, after Sarevok is defeated, everything is mostly fine except Kalar Argent and her crusade to the north, which has a lot of questions involved in it. Outside of those things, we start the game tracking down one of Sarevok's final lieutenants, specifically a woman named Korlas, or Korlas, however you want to do it. But this woman worked for Sarevok. Now, we start out by talking with Imoen, who is with us here, and if we ask her some questions during this conversation, she will explain that she is being taught how to be a mage from Duke Janeth, and as such isn't available as a party member, but will explain that if we need any help, there's Flaming Fist here to help as we clear this tomb and search for Korlas. So as we move forward, we'll quickly run into one of her people, at which point they will explain that what Sarevok's people here are doing in general is trying to get a hold of Sarevok's sword, or at least they already did, and they sold it to someone. And they thought that you might be here to get that sword back. However, it's already gone. But as we make our way through the catacombs area, which is the second level of this dungeon, we will eventually make our way to Korlas and where she is hiding. Now, this is a fight, obviously. You can choose to spare the people down here if you wish, or you can kill them outright. Right now, that's not a big deal. It does have some implications later throughout the actual story, but we'll talk about that at the appropriate time. Now, after this initial little introductory mission, once we leave, we'll be hit with this little narrative.
She is defeated, and the last of Sarevok's influence died with her. Your foster father, Gorion, has been avenged. With the exception of your friend Imoen, those who helped you thwart your half-brother's schemes drift away from you, returning to their lives. For the first time since you left Candlekeep, you have the opportunity to reflect on the astonishing turns your life has taken. Though you are fettered by the rulers of Baldur's Gate, a sense of unease plagues you. You can't help but hear the rumors, the whispers that you share the same dark blood as Sarevok. Some hint you killed your half-brother, not for the good of the city, but so you could usurp his place and his power. For the moment, however, your persecutors' voices are drowned out by an ever-growing number of others with more immediate concerns. Every day, more refugees driven from their homes by the servants of Kalar Argent arrive at the city gates. Many have stories of the Shining Lady's grace. All have tales of her followers' wrath. A 10-day after Korlaj's defeat, you retire to your chamber in the ducal palace, your thoughts troubled. You wonder what effect Kalar's crusade will have on Baldur's Gate, little knowing how close at hand the answer is.
Now, in that narrative, we of course learned that our companions outside of Imoen have dispersed back to their regular lives, and moreover that Baldur's Gate is being flooded with refugees from Kalar's crusade to the north. Now, after this, we are woken up by Imoen, who's been hearing strange sounds around the ducal palace. Shortly after this, we are attacked by assassins who manage to hit Imoen. Now, Duke Janeth, who is training Imoen, shows up to help Imoen out and make sure she lives. Your job is to clear the rest of the ducal palace, which involves just killing a few more assassins. And then you can go downstairs to talk to all 4 of the dukes of Baldur's Gate. Now, they will task you with gathering your companions that are still in the city, if you should so choose. Moreover, you can also explore and prepare for an expedition, because the Grand Dukes are tasking you to go and accompany some Flaming Fist troops to the north to head off Kalar's crusade, which, even if you don't agree to, you have to do because that's the game. But moreover, she did send assassins to seemingly try to kill you, so you might have an interest in doing so. As you get ready to go on the crusade here, or your own personal crusade against Kalar's crusade, you will have the opportunity to explore Baldur's Gate a little bit. Now, mostly this is just small side quests in hub areas around the city, such as Sorceress Sundries and Elfsong Tavern, the Flaming Fist headquarters, that type of thing. You don't have to do this at all, you can completely skip it. Even if you don't get all the companions that are available to be rounded up right here, they just show up in camp in the next act. The only thing that's really missable here is a specific item you can get at Elfsong Tavern, which will be used for an achievement, which we're not really going to cover here, but my point is you can miss that, but beyond that, there's not really much you can miss by just not exploring this besides some side quests. So whenever you're ready, tell Corwin, the woman who's been talking to us here and there, who is one of the new companions for Siege of Dragonspear, that we are ready to head out, basically, and at any point after this, we can then head upstairs to the ducal palace and attempt to sleep. Now, when we arrive in that room, we'll be greeted by a hooded man. Now, this hooded man will make a bunch of cryptic remarks, basically, about watching the situation unfold, but we learn very little from this conversation outside of the introduction of the character. Now, we can speak to Imoen in our room here as well real quick, and she will explain that she's not coming as she is recovering from her poison wound from the assassins. Moreover, she's still studying under Duke Janeth anyway, and she wouldn't be much use to you in the field. So at this point, we can actually go to sleep, and then sometime in the morning, we are woken up by a young woman named Ski. Ski is one of the Duke's daughters, Intar Silvershield. Now, Ski will basically tell you that she is joining the Flaming Fist so she can accompany you guys north, because she is bored of being trapped in her noble life, as she sees it, and asks you not to tell her father. Now, when you go to leave, you'll talk to the Dukes downstairs one more time. You can choose to tell Intar that his daughter is joining the Flaming Fists. He will tell you that he already knows this, but thanks for the information, and you get a reward if you tell him. And at this point, you can leave the city after you go outside and talk to Corwin again. As you're leaving, some people in the crowd, mostly cheering for you, but some people will accuse you of being in league with Sarevok, as it is slowly becoming more and more known that you are his half-brother. But once we leave the city, that brings us to the next act of the game, where we arrive at the Flaming Fist camp.
Captain Shale Corwin and her aide, Corporal Bence Duncan, maintain order in the caravan from Baldur's Gate. Some who joined the expedition are unaccustomed to Flaming Fist discipline. Hard lessons are learned in the early days of the march north. The journey is slowed by the Crusade's victims. A multitude of broken, haunted men and women clog the coast way. When asked, they speak of fields set aflame, granaries ransacked, and family conscripted by the Crusade. Yet many characterize these hardships as necessary sacrifices in pursuit of a greater good. A strange acceptance, even admiration of Kalar Argent is disconcertingly common in those she has wronged. Some proclaim the Shining Lady a prophet, doing the work of not one but all faiths, all gods. Is it possible Kalar Argent's cause is a righteous one? Or is she engaged in a great deception to further her own agenda, as Sarevok once did?
And what of your goals?
Many souls were lost during the Dragonspear Wars. I will see justice done and restore them to the light.
Yes, quite honorable. But what makes you think yourself capable of achieving this, Kalar Argent?
dare befoul my person with your magics?
Blood is something to behold, not fear. Your divine heritage radiates from you. From which of your parents, mother or father?
Enough of these games and enough of your questions. Heffernan, get this mage out of my sight.
At once, my lady. We will have words about this scarred one.
Perhaps.
The camp here will act as our actual camp. All of our companions, if dismissed, will go here. We can find vendors and everything that we need. The Siege of Dragonspear expansion is very linear, so every time we leave an act, we can't go back to the previous areas. So while the acts themselves can be completed relatively quickly, all the side content there has to be done while you're doing that act because you cannot come back to them afterwards. So in this first area here, all we actually have to do is go and find the bridge to the northeast of us. The Flaming Fist and basically everyone else in your war party, if you will, are going to spend the night here, and then in the morning take this bridge farther on to Dragonspear Castle, ideally, which is where the crusade is actually holed up, which is something we can learn before we leave Baldur's Gate from the dukes themselves, who tell us basically where we're headed specifically when we go north. The Flaming Fist are going to camp here and then continue on in the morning. However, you can choose to poke around, which obviously you have to do. So the actual goal of this is to just find this bridge to the northeast of us, and as soon as you show up, there's a bunch of crusade forces guarding it. They panic, a mage blows up the bridge, and we are forced into a fight. After this fight, none other than Kalar Argent actually shows up. Because of the space in between the bridge and everything, and she's on the other side of it, she requests a parley with the Child of Baal. Now, you can learn quite a few things from this conversation. For starters, while she is initially blamed for sending the assassins after you that we mentioned earlier, according to her, she wanted you captured, not killed. Moreover, she goes on to explain that she is not a Baal spawn, as has been alluded to here and there. She is actually an Aasimar, which is a person of divine heritage from like a solar or a celestial entity usually, that can sometimes manifest in mortals, which makes them an Aasimar. Now, Kalar will explain, if you choose to ask her about it, that her goal is to march into the first layer of hell, Avernus, and bring back lost souls. The specifics of this are not known to us at the time, but she will tell us as much. Now, after this conversation and the bridge being destroyed, that's it for this chapter. That's all we have to do, and whenever we're ready, we can go to the world map and choose to travel to the Troll Claw Woods, which begins the next act of the game here.
With the coastway crossing destroyed, the only safe route across the winding water is Boriskir Bridge, where your father Baal was murdered by the mad god Cyric. Each step toward the distant landmark fills you with unease. You are not alone in that. The Flaming Fists also fear what may lie ahead. If Kalar has destroyed Boriskir Bridge, the expedition will not reach Dragonspear Castle in time to stop the crusade. The forces of Baldur's Gate and its allies will be outmatched, slaughtered. These fears grip your allies, but also drive them forward. The anxious whispers fall silent when the march is called to a halt less than a day's travel from Boriskir. The Flaming Fist sets up camp and prepares for the next meeting with the crusade, while you plan your next move.
I am sorry for your loss, but rest assured that your husband's sacrifice will never be forgotten. Signed, yours ever in faith, Kalar Argent.
I am sure the family will find your words most comforting, milady.
More letters of condolence, my lady? Surely there are other, more urgent matters that require your attention?
I am not of a mind to argue this again, Heffernan.
Their deaths lay heavy on us all, my lady. But they sacrificed themselves for a greater good. Letting their passing distract us would do them a disservice. Condolences can wait.
You are correct. We cannot afford distractions at this juncture. Gather the faithful. We have much to do.
Now, this act is also deceptively simple, but basically what it boils down to is that because the bridge we were originally planning to use to march to Dragonspear Castle got destroyed, we have to find a second one known as Boriskir Bridge. Now, this particular act has a lot of variation in the way things can go down. So when we first arrive at our new Flaming Fist camp, the corporal of the Flaming Fist, the Vince Duncan, will explain the situation where basically there's a standoff between the Crusade and the keep of Bridgefort, which is currently under siege right outside the bridge of Boriskir Bridge. What we need to do in this act is resolve the stalemate between the Crusaders and the people inside Bridgefort, which is under siege. Now, we have a ton of options available to do this with, actually. We can just attack the Crusaders outside of Bridgefort just directly, which would be very, very difficult on higher difficulties. You can do it on like story mode, or if you're just really careful, higher difficulties. But there is a ton of people in that Crusader camp, so it can be very difficult, and you might not want to do that. Alternatively, there are a couple of ways inside the Crusader camp, non-hostily, as well as the keep of Bridgefort, even though it is under siege. We can talk to Jaheira, actually, one of the recurring characters from the first game that we can run into on our way to the Crusade camp, who will inform us that there's a way inside Bridgefort, but we require a ward stone to activate a teleport circle that leads inside. This ward stone should be at the ruined temple of Baal, which has now been taken over by worshippers of Cyric, the god who killed Baal. So if we choose to go to this temple of Baal, which is hidden inside a couple caves, where we can fight a dragon, by the way, the first one in the game, but through this cave system will lead us to the temple of Baal. This temple has been taken over by followers of Cyric, who are all hearing voices and things and going generally insane, which might not sound interesting at first because Cyric is the mad god. It does get a bit more interesting than that. First of all, right when we enter, we can find a trapped Crusader. If we choose to free him or kill him and take his seal off of him, we can report this news to the Crusader camp, which will then allow us entry because a relative of this trapped Crusader is in the Crusader camp, and we can kind of gain entry that way by saving or just bringing the news of what happened to him to his relative. However, should we continue to explore the Temple of Baal, we can find some interesting things. For starters, we can kill a dragonkin who has the key we need to get farther into the temple, which is pretty cool. Apparently, she's of some relation to the dragon guarding the cave, by the way. That's what the dialogue tells us. But once we have her key, we can descend deeper into the temple here, where we can run into a Neolithid as well as a few other enemies, but we can actually happen across the leader of Cyric's followers here, who will actually have the ward stone on her person that we need to activate the teleport circle to get into Bridgefort. She is under the impression that something is driving her followers insane that is absolutely not the mad god Cyric. This has nothing to do with the main plot of Siege of Dragonspear. I only mention it because what is actually controlling the followers of Cyric inside this temple turns out to be a mind flayer. And because of Baldur's Gate 3's focus on mind flayers and the fact that this was made in 2016, I kind of, just as a quick aside, am curious if they were trying to weave in a potential mind flayer plot, because it's kind of an open secret that Beamdog, the people who made Siege of Dragonspear, originally wanted to make Baldur's Gate 3 before they got passed over for it. Again, none of that has anything to do with anything as far as the story goes, I just wanted to mention it. Once we have the ward stone, that will get us access to Bridgefort from the teleport circle, which opens up a few more options for us once we're inside that keep. Those options being rallying the people inside the keep to have them attack the Crusaders from the keep, as well as enlisting the Flaming Fist from your camp to actually head up a double-pronged attack, which if you want to attack the Crusaders is probably the way to go. You can also negotiate a peaceful surrender of the keep while destroying all the supplies inside, so people live, the Crusade doesn't benefit from it, and nobody dies, which is arguably the best option, really. And alternatively, I haven't mentioned it yet, but you can actually just straight up side with the Crusaders once you kind of save their kids or whatever. You can actually sabotage the door to the keep. Probably the worst way to go, I guess, if you really want to think about it. But basically, you can sabotage the gate to the keep and help the Crusade get inside. So that's something you can do. A lot of variations with how this resolves. But the main thing is, this situation needs to resolve itself because you need to get across Boriskir Bridge. So, using one of those mini methods I've detailed, eventually the Crusade will no longer be directly in front of Boriskir Bridge, clearing the path for you to cross. Now, they try to blow up the bridge unsuccessfully this time because you managed to get to them first, and once you go to cross the bridge, you will be knocked unconscious by an unseen force, and this cinematic will play. Now, that was a depiction of Cyric killing Bal on Boriskir Bridge, because this is the spot where Bal died. At this point, we'll have another conversation with the Hooded Man, who will explain how, despite having half a god in your veins, you seem to be unable to grasp your potential the way Kalar does, who has only a drop of divine blood from generations ago. But once that's done, we can leave, which brings us to the next act of the game.
Signs of the Crusade's recent presence can be seen on the road to Dragonspear Castle, but the Shining Lady's actual servants are rarely encountered. The few Crusaders you spy in the distance invariably retreat at the first opportunity. As the march wears on, fatigue grips your company, tempers flare within the caravan. Your reputation as the hero of Baldur's Gate protects you from petty squabbles and angry outbursts. Or perhaps, after what happened on Boriskir Bridge, there is another reason few are willing to cross you. These thoughts are put aside when you see the banners of Waterdeep, Daggerford, and the Flaming Fist at the edge of the Coalition siege camp. Dragonspear Castle is near, and so is Kalar's day of reckoning.
Why does he still refuse me? How can he deny the righteousness of our cause?
We speak of a child of Bal.
And yet the Ballspawn is the hero of Baldur's Gate, and by all accounts saved the Sword Coast from ruin during the Iron Crisis.
You cannot ask me to show mercy to this abomination, not after what happened to my brother.
For the good of the Crusade, you must. We cannot take the Ballspawn's life.
Forgive me, my lady. I do not know if I can do that.
You can. I have faith in you, Ashatil. For us, forgiveness must prevail over revenge.
We are basically right outside Dragonspear Castle now, which is where the Crusade and Kalar Argent are held up. Once we arrive at our Coalition camp, which is made up of all of the forces that were actually sent up here before us, as we are basically just reinforcements to the forces that were already here, we can talk to the leaders of this coalition, who will basically say that after the events on Boriskir Bridge, where the symbol of Bal was burned under you after you had your cinematic about how Bal was killed, that basically people don't trust you and they need you to leave camp, so the soldiers don't get too uneasy. However, they do have some work for you to do. They believe they know a back way into the basement of Dragonspear Castle, where hopefully you can learn some information as well as soften up the Crusaders before any confrontation might happen. So that's our next goal. We need to go to the Underground River, basically, is what it's called, which is guarded by another Crusader camp, which we can, again, stealth or kill everyone in to get into the Underground River. And once we are in here, we are almost to the basement, actually. Before we do that, there is a side quest here in the Underground River area where you can meet an undead dragon who guards the door, but with words only. You can actually just walk right by it. And inside the cave that it was guarding, or the ruins it was guarding, we can kill a bunch of necromancers and find Hefernan's ritual notes. Heffernan is the mage that has been tagging along with Kalar Argent up to this point that we'll have seen in some of these cinematics, or scripted events, whatever you want to call them. Now, these notes ritual how Heffernan was planning on raising a bunch of undead minions, basically, which, as you might imagine, the righteous Kalar Argent would likely not appreciate. So that's something you can learn down here, and beyond that, once we get into the basement of Dragonspear Castle, all we need to do is find the lift up into the actual, proper basement, as this is more like a cave under the basement, which we can do by talking to two ogres, and we can basically just talk them into letting us up. There's a few different ways to do this around this room, but once they agree to give us a lift up, we are in the actual proper basement. Now, before leaving the Coalition camp, we were likely asked to poison the food and water supplies here, as well as plant a barrel potentially under the gate to Dragonspear Castle that could blow it up in the event of an attack, which are things we can do. But the main thing we want to do is find Heffernan down here, because his quarters are down here, and we can find him talking to a seemingly dark entity through a portal of sorts. Now, this is a big deal because, again, obviously we might be noticing a pattern here with Heffernan being much darker than Kalar Argent claims to be, who claims that she just wants to rescue lost souls from Avernus. Well, from this conversation, we can glean that Heffernan plans on opening a portal to Avernus, and he needs divine blood to do that. Kalar's wasn't enough. She's who they tried to do it with first, but because her blood from divines is so old, from being generations back, it's just not strong enough to do the job. So they want you, which is why they weren't actually trying to kill you at the beginning of the game, but kidnap you, so they can use your blood to open the way to Avernus, to then supposedly rescue all of these lost souls. However, as we get the impression from this conversation and him talking to an entity through this portal, as well as if we save the ghost dragon from before, the ghost in Heffernan's room here, will give us even more context that Heffernan is clearly working with someone else in addition to Kalar. It becomes clear that Heffernan might not be who he's trying to say that he is. After this meeting with Heffernan, obviously things don't go well, so we need to escape. We need to go all the way back to the Coalition camp, which involves fighting through all the Crusaders we didn't kill on our way here, basically. And once we reach the Coalition camp, we are told that the leaders of the Coalition have went to parley with Kalar at the Dead Man's Wood, which we can leave and then go have that conversation. Basically, Kalar in this parley says that they will give up and surrender their entire crusade as well as just disperse if they hand over you, the Child of Baal. Now, depending on what you have or haven't done at this point, this might not make any sense, but as I've already explained, Kalar wants your blood to open this portal to Avernus. Even some of the dialogue you can have here acts like your character doesn't know that, but you can also have the potential to know that, so this conversation can be a little weird. Now, regardless of what you say, and even if you agree to give yourself up, it won't happen, and Kalar will basically demand a battle. Now, we head back to the Coalition camp and are immediately attacked. We have to fend off several attacks from Crusaders, in which we actually leave extra forces. We can kind of direct which forces we want to help with which wave. Ultimately, we have to defend our Coalition camp from Crusaders, and once that's done, we can leave and head for Dragonspear Castle proper, where a siege will play out.
Steel and magic still clash in the distance, but you have thwarted Kalar's attack upon the siege camp. The time has come for the combined forces of Waterdeep, Daggerford, and Baldur's Gate to take the battle to the Shining Lady. The walls surrounding Dragonspear's ruins teem with Crusaders. Among them are Kalar's most trusted lieutenants, men and women of unparalleled skill, ready to sacrifice all for their leader. Defeating them and penetrating the castle will not be easy, but that is the task before you.
The battle unfolds as you expected, my lady. Our forces fall back to the castle even now.
The battle is not the war. Whatever blood we shed is worth it as long as the Child of Baal bleeds as well.
What is your command?
We must hold Dragonspear or all is lost.
And the Baal spawn?
Bring the Child of Baal to me. Our triumph depends on it.
The siege here can have a ton of variation depending on what you did or didn't do, what side quests you completed. Did you poison the food and water in the basement? Did you set the barrel to blow up the gate? Did you recruit extra allies through side quests? Did you kill extra allies the siege defenders, the Crusaders, could have? Or did you let them live and did they make it here to help the Crusaders? A lot of variations to this siege, but basically, there's a battle here, you'll win it. Eventually, you'll run into Ashatil, which is Kalar's right-hand soldier, basically, who I believe is meant to be a solar, but I can't really tell. She does have wings, though. She will challenge you to one-on-one combat. If you defeat her in this combat, the siege will just be over. If you don't agree to that, you actually have to fight all the enemies. But once that's done, and you are inevitably victorious, Kalar retreats into the castle, at which point you will have to follow her. And eventually you'll make your way down to the basement where you were originally when you confronted Heffernan, and you'll get to open some big magical doors that you passed by the first time you were here. Upon opening these doors and walking in, Kalar and Heffernan will be by themselves initially, and they'll basically explain that they're still planning on using your blood and they lured you down here because this is where the portal to Avernus is. So Heffernan was supposed to bind you in place with magic, however, he also captures Kalar, because this is where Heffernan reveals his dastardly plot, because he is actually a servant of the demon Belafet. And in addition to opening the portal to Avernus, he plans on letting fiends use it to invade Toril, which is like the equivalent of Earth in D&D. So this happens, you all get transported to Avernus, or at least you travel to Avernus.
Avernus. The first pit of the 9 hells assaults your senses. The stench of brimstone and curdled milk fills your nostrils, coating your tongue and throat in a nausea-inducing film. The bitter moans of the damned envelop you, pressing in from all sides, smothering. As your watering eyes grow accustomed to the dim lava light of the pit, you begin to feel the oppressive majesty of the blasted waste around you. In pursuing the Shining Lady, you have been brought to the darkest place imaginable, and the pursuit is not yet over. Crusader corpses litter the ground around you, but of Kalar herself, there is no sign.
And then you have to fight a bunch of demons in Avernus. So you need to basically chase down Kalar, who is still trying to do her thing of rescuing lost souls, supposedly, from Avernus here, because this is where she wanted to go, just not the circumstances with which she wanted to be here. Now, we'll fight a bunch of demons, run into some Crusaders, we'll move to the next map, where we find ourselves on a bridge. We cross this bridge until we catch up with Kalar, who enters the tower where Belafet is. However, the doors close behind us, and we are greeted by the demon Thrix. So, depending on this conversation, we can't really kill Thrix, but we can choose to attack him, and he'll spawn like waves of demons and stuff to fight us. There is the option of a riddle, where if we solve his riddle, he'll just let us go up, because he doesn't like his master anyway. But eventually, after that, we will find ourselves riding an elevator up. So after a few waves of enemies, we'll find ourselves at the top of said elevator, where we can confront Belafet. Now, this is where we learn a lot of things. Turns out, Kalar Argent isn't quite the righteous crusader she tried to make herself out to be, because the entire reason she wanted to save these souls from Avernus was actually just one person. Her uncle, On Argent. On, quite a while back when Kalar was just a child, actually saved her from Avernus after she inadvertently summoned demons and things. On sacrificed himself to save her, and Kalar's basically dedicated her life to saving just him. Everything else was just a byproduct. She wasn't really all that interested in all the other souls here. Now, because of Hefernan's betrayal and his service to Belafet, Belafet will try to turn Kalar into a blackguard, which can happen. However, during this conversation, you can also convince her to fight by your side. Depending on which way it goes, you'll have to either fight Heffernan and Belafet, or Belafet and Kalar turned blackguard, because if that happens, Belafet kills Heffernan outright. Now, once you've won this fight, you will be able to free and talk to On Argent, and potentially Kalar Argent, where they will explain some more of this stuff. And basically that while Kalar had good intentions, clearly she did terrible things for something that wasn't really worth one man's life. After this, you'll escape back to the portal to Toril, where either On Argent or Kalar will stay behind to close the portal with the demon blood that should be able to close it. The blood from Belafet's defeated body. Now, if Kalar turned into a blackguard, On will stay behind to guard this portal, and if Kalar was saved and joined your party, she will stay behind and guard this portal as well, which is probably a fitting punishment for all the deaths she's caused. Now, at this point, we can return back to the Crusaders. Now, I do want to mention just real quick that Belafet is actually the last boss of Icewind Dale, which is set about 87 years before the events of Baldur's Gate 1, just as a fun aside, which is why Belafet is trapped here. But once we get back, we'll be celebrated as a hero, again, because we effectively ended Kalar's crusade. And we can enjoy the celebrations and eventually go to sleep, where we are then awoken. Now, this is where I want to take a moment to mention that while we are traveling throughout Siege of Dragonspear, it was very possible that we would have encountered several dreams with the Hooded Man. Because the Hooded Man claims to know all about our Ballspawn heritage and is watching us and evaluating us for some unknown reason. Now, throughout these dreams, he will basically try to get us to attack people we used to know. Sarabok, Imawin, and eventually they turn into these monsters that attack us, and we either are killed or are forced to kill them. Now, these dreams are important because after all this happens, we have one of these dreams. Except in this dream, it is Ski from all the way back at the very beginning that is Duke Intar Silvershield's daughter. And again, we're forced to fight this thing and eventually kill it. And then we wake up, and it turns out it wasn't so much a dream as reality because Ski Silvershield is dead in front of us, and we're standing over her, as a bunch of people walk in and discover the murder. Naturally, it is assumed that we, of course, probably did this, because we're standing over her coated in blood. So at this point, there's a bunch of conversation. You can try to convince people that obviously you wouldn't do this, but at the end of the day, you have to be taken into custody and brought back to Baldur's Gate.
You return to Baldur's Gate under circumstances much darker than anyone would have believed. What should have been a moment of crowning triumph is instead a nightmare beyond your understanding. Ski Silvershield lies dead, seemingly at your hand. The siege force's clerics are unable to revive her. Her magically preserved body has been transported to Grand Duke Entar Silvershield, who clings to the faint hope that his daughter might someday be resurrected. You share that hope. Without Ski, you may never know the truth of what happened that dark night. Once you thought yourself free of your father's taint. But as you journeyed to Dragonspear Castle, you realized this was not so. You are a child of Baal, Lord of Murder. A piece of him resides in you. Has it grown beyond your control? Was yours the hand that plunged the dagger into Ski Silvershield's breast? You do not know, and that fact haunts you. When you left Baldur's Gate, people cheered you as the city's hero. Now they look upon you and see something very different.
Now, this is sort of the epilogue, and it can actually also go a couple of different ways. There's a bit of a trial where you'll be asked if you did this or not, and you can either present evidence, not defend yourself at all, admit to the terrible things you've done that all occurred while the Siege of Dragonspear was happening. So, if you did the good thing, didn't poison your enemies, and were just generally righteous about your approach to this, you can present that as evidence, at which point people will believe you. However, due to the situation, you'll still find yourself in a jail cell. Alternatively, you can not defend yourself at all, just let people think you're guilty, and then you find yourself in that jail cell. Now, this is where it changes. If you've effectively proved that you probably didn't do this through your actions, the dukes of the city, because of your service to the city, will just basically lead you to the sewers and be like, listen, we understand you probably didn't do this, but because of the situation, we kind of just need you to leave. Now, the other version of this is that if you didn't try to defend yourself or people just weren't convinced, then you'll eventually be broken out by a thief and you'll have to make your way through the sewers yourself, which involves fighting a bunch of things, until eventually you find yourself at the same exit that the dukes would have led you to. Prior to this, the hooded man actually visits us in our jail cell, where it is revealed through a cutscene that the hooded man is the one who actually killed Ski and stole her soul so she couldn't be resurrected, literally just to put you in this predicament. Cutting back to the cave exit where we leave the city of Baldur's Gate, a wanted man, so to speak. Imowen will meet us right outside the cave, will join up with us. We will then go on to meet some of the party members that we were with, usually Jaheira, Khalid, Dynahir, and Minsk. And then you guys will leave, and then shortly after we'll arrive at a secluded place in the woods where the ending of the Siege of Dragonspear happens. Now, this ending is the direct tie-in to Baldur's Gate 2. So, with that out of the way, we have covered the story of Baldur's Gate 1 in its entirety, as well as the Siege of Dragonspear. There you guys go. There is the story of Baldur's Gate 1. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you guys so much for watching. I love putting series like this together and sharing all this video game knowledge with the world. So truly, just thank you so much. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.
Your eyes burn as a thin, acrid mist rises from the ground and envelops you. Your mind clouds, shadowed figures strike and fade away. Your companions' cries echo in your skull, and the world around you fades to gray.